You wake up to the news. Not a rumor, but a verified level 1 threat. Kim Jong Un is preparing his next big move. It's an action, perhaps a major missile test, a sudden troop movement, or a devastating cyber attack that threatens to destabilize global security and force a catastrophic response. The clock starts now. You have 48 hours. The world often views the North Korean threat through the lens of history, but its next move will be defined by speed, surprise, and technological asymmetry. The weight of a geopolitical crisis, the fear of global risk and nuclear war, is now centered on the single most powerful office on Earth, the Oval Office. The question isn't if a major crisis will occur, but when and what happens in the critical 48 hours that follow. This is not theory. This is the emergency playbook, the series of decisions and strategic actions that must be executed to defuse the threat and preserve global stability. We're going inside the crisis window to analyze the options, the risks, and the terrifying speed at which the US defense strategy must be deployed. The 48-hour clock begins when the US intelligence community, specifically the CIA, DIA, and NSA, moves from a possible threat assessment to probable. This shift, often triggered by real-time satellite imagery, encrypted communications, intercepts, or human intelligence, launches the most intense period of decision-making in the US government. The initial hours are dedicated to situation awareness. The president requires 3 things. Firstly, the target. What exactly is Kim Jong Un planning? A missile proliferation test? A sudden North Korean next move against South Korea? A large-scale cyber warfare attack on Western financial markets? Secondly, the capability. Can they pull it off? This involves detailed analysis of missile readiness, launch trajectories, and the integrity of their cyber attack infrastructure. Thirdly, the motive. Why now? This is the core geopolitical analysis, connecting the action to domestic politics, sanctions relief, or a global diplomatic event. The first 12 hours are a triage phase, often involving a continuous stream of briefings from the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Every scenario must be weighed against the fear of chaos and instability that North Korea deliberately seeks to exploit. The biggest flaw in many North Korea threat assessments is focusing solely on the kinetic side, missiles and tanks. The real danger, the one that can paralyze the US faster than any ICBM, is North Korea's cyber warfare capability. The Lazarus Group and other state-sponsored hacker entities are not just after cryptocurrency, they are after intelligence, disruption, and the ability to sow global risk. A successful cyber attack in the first 48 hours could, firstly, blind satellite command, disrupting US and South Korean reconnaissance, effectively cutting off real-time intelligence. Secondly, paralyze financial markets. A major attack on Wall Street, using cryptocurrency theft to launder funds, could plunge global markets into panic, forcing the US to divert resources. Thirdly, degrade missile defense. Inserting malicious code into regional missile defense systems, creating a devastating window of vulnerability. This requires a multi-layered countermeasure. The NSA must move from defensive posture to an offensive deterrence strategy, deploying countermeasures that degrade North Korea's cyber infrastructure instantly. The first strategic move in the emergency plan must therefore be a digital counterstrike. Simultaneous with military and cyber readiness, the diplomatic track is critical. The Secretary of State and the UN ambassador are tasked with finding an off-ramp for Kim Jong Un, a way for him to save face while backing down from his next big move. China is the key. The most crucial diplomatic tool is the relationship with Beijing. China does not want a volatile, nuclear-armed North Korea on its border, but it also does not want a US-backed unified Korea. The diplomatic challenge is to leverage Beijing's geopolitical analysis, its fear of instability, to pressure Pyongyang. The diplomatic window is usually the narrowest, often collapsing entirely within the first 24 to 36 hours. The message from the US must be unified. A clear, concise statement that escalation will be met with overwhelming, synchronized, decisive action, while still offering a path back to dialogue. This is the delicate balance between strength and restraint. The emergency plan requires a range of credible military options, from non-kinetic deterrence to preemptive kinetic strike capabilities. These options are constantly updated and presented to the president based on the latest intelligence. Firstly, the show of force, non-kinetic deterrence. In the first 24 hours, the fastest and most politically safe response is a visible and overwhelming show of force. This involves, firstly, carrier strike group deployment. Immediately diverting a US Navy carrier strike group, CSG, to the Sea of Japan, positioning its F divided by A-18 Super Hornets and Aegis-equipped destroyers within range of North Korea. This sends an undeniable message of military commitment. Secondly, stealth bomber flyovers, B-2 Spirit or Bone Lancer bombers conducting freedom of navigation flyovers, visible to North Korean radar. These missions, often accompanied by South Korean or Japanese fighters, demonstrate an overwhelming air superiority. Global security is instantly enhanced by showing credible strength without firing a shot, appealing to the desire for security and peace. Secondly, the red line doctrine, preemptive strike, limited. If intelligence confirms a launch is imminent, a limited, preemptive kinetic strike becomes necessary to protect global risk. This is a terrifying decision, as it risks immediate North Korean retaliation. Firstly, targeting launch sites. Using Tomahawk missiles or F-22 strikes to destroy launch infrastructure, mobile missile carriers, or assembly sites before they become operational. The key is precision, minimizing collateral damage to avoid escalating the conflict beyond control. Secondly, decapitation strike, a highly sensitive and debated option focusing on neutralizing senior command and control assets. The motive is to disrupt the entire chain of command, crippling the North Korean next move. This requires real-time intelligence and a near-perfect execution. The goal of this option is not regime change, but missile defense to enforce the red line against the nuclear proliferation of a known aggressor. The inherent risk, however, is that North Korea's response could be a desperate act of nuclear war. Thirdly, full integrated missile defense, defensive posture. The most urgent military deployment in the first 48 hours is to fully activate the Integrated Air and Missile Defense (IAMD) system. Firstly, THAAD deployment, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. THAAD system in South Korea must be placed on immediate alert, ready to intercept short and medium-range ballistic missiles. Secondly, Aegis BMD, US Navy destroyers equipped with Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense (BMD). Systems are deployed to cover potential launch trajectories in the Sea of Japan and the Yellow Sea. Thirdly, Aegis Ashore, regional land-based missile defense systems are brought to peak readiness. This option focuses purely on security, minimizing US casualties and protecting allies. It is the ultimate insurance policy against the chaos that Kim Jong Un's actions could unleash. It appeals to the fear of danger and fear by offering a technological shield. In the Oval Office, the president must confront the heavy human cost of every decision. The General Zersky's after-action report after the simulated conflict in Donetsk, Luhansk served as a stark reminder. Each destroyed tank means another family without a son. This is the core ethical dilemma of the emergency plan: how to achieve security and deterrence without causing a devastating loss of life. The decision for a kinetic strike is never taken lightly. It risks not only the lives of US and allied troops, but also the lives of countless civilians, both North and South Korean. The true measure of leadership is the restraint used when overwhelming force is available. The 48 hours is not just a military timeline, it is a diplomatic window of opportunity and extreme pressure. The president's next strategic move is to mobilize global diplomacy, not just to enforce sanctions, but to isolate Pyongyang completely and manage the fallout of the North Korean next move. While existing sanctions against Kim Jong Un are comprehensive, a crisis requires immediate, surgical economic action to cause economic paralysis within the first 48 hours. This involves, firstly, oil embargo, pressuring China and Russia to immediately halt all oil and fuel shipments. This is Pyongyang's greatest vulnerability, directly affecting its military and agricultural output. Secondly, financial isolation, freezing assets of key North Korean banks, individuals, and front companies in global financial hubs. The goal is to cut off all access to hard currency, including money generated from cyber warfare and illegal arms trade. Thirdly, targeting labor exports, blocking all revenue generated from North Korean forced labor overseas, a key source of foreign cash. The goal of the UN Security Council, UNSC, must be convened immediately. While China and Russia may veto any resolution authorizing military force, the goal is to achieve global condemnation. Firstly, unifying the message. A unified statement from the world community, even without enforcement power, strips Kim Jong Un of any political legitimacy and rallies international support for the US defense strategy. Secondly, the power of norms. Emphasizing the violation of international norms regarding nuclear proliferation and global risk reinforces the narrative that North Korea is an outlier, not a sovereign actor in good standing. This is an appeal to the desire for peace and stability. In a modern crisis, the information war is as vital as the actual war. The White House must control the global media narrative within the first 48 hours. Firstly, transparency and restraint. The communication must be clear, honest, and emphasize restraint and the commitment to peace. This is to avoid a global panic and counter North Korean propaganda. Secondly, focus on the threat, not the people. The message must clearly distinguish between the dictatorial regime of Kim Jong Un and the long-suffering people of North Korea. This protects the moral high ground. Thirdly, a call for unity. The president must use the media platform to appeal for unity among allies, reinforcing the image of a strong, cohesive international front against the threat. The US defense strategy is only as strong as its alliances. Within the first 48 hours, the president must secure absolute commitment from South Korea, ROK, and Japan. Firstly, integrated command. Ensuring seamless integration of intelligence, missile defense systems, and military command structures. The recent synchronized timing between the Ukrainian-French forces serves as a critical lesson in Allied effectiveness. Secondly, the Mutual Defense Treaty, reaffirming the commitment to the defense of Seoul and Tokyo, which acts as the ultimate deterrence against a conventional North Korean next move. The strategy of time is not about buying time, it's about using every minute to place overwhelming diplomatic, economic, and moral pressure on Kim Jong Un, making the cost of his next big move too high to bear. The digital domain is where the emergency plan is tested fastest and most frequently. Cyber warfare is the preferred method of attack by Kim Jong Un because it is deniable, cheap, and highly destructive. North Korea's cyber warfare does not target military bases. It targets the economic and social fabric of the West. This means the US defense strategy must protect against two key vectors. Firstly, cryptocurrency laundering. North Korean state-sponsored hackers routinely steal billions in crypto to fund their missile proliferation. The response must be instantaneous, tracing and neutralizing these stolen funds by coordinating with major exchanges and government agencies. This directly hits the regime's lifeline. Secondly, health and utilities. Attacks on US and allied health and utility grids are designed to cause mass panic and divert resources from the military. The immediate counter is to deploy cyber protection teams, CPTs, from US Cyber Command to reinforce key infrastructure instantly. The cyber defense is a test of speed and synchronization. It is a battle fought in milliseconds, far faster than any conventional military response. The pain of a cyber attack, losing access to bank accounts, medical records, or power, is a powerful motivator for decisive action. The US cannot simply react. It must project deterrence in the digital realm. The emergency plan includes a range of surgical offensive cyber options. Firstly, network degradation, targeting key nodes in North Korea's command, control, and communication, C3, network, to degrade the integrity of their incoming targeting data and their ability to execute the North Korean next move. This disrupts the chain of command, a critical lesson from the simulated Donetsk-Luhansk conflict. Secondly, propaganda neutralization, crippling the regime's internal and external propaganda machine, using digital tools to sow, doubt, and undermine Kim Jong Un's authority. This focuses on the pain of the regime, loss of control. The most difficult challenge is finding the off switch, the single point of failure in North Korea's system that can be exploited to render the missile proliferation program temporarily inert. Firstly, predictive analysis. using AI-driven geopolitical analysis to predict the timing and trajectory of a test launch with near-perfect accuracy, allowing for a precision strike in the moments before launch. Secondly, digital interdiction. Inserting digital false flags or decoys into North Korea's targeting data to lead their systems astray, forcing them to abort the launch. The digital domain underscores the need for unity and synchronization between all US defense branches. Cyber Command, Space Command, and Strategic Command must operate as one cohesive unit to meet the 48 hours ultimatum. The defense of freedom and security starts online. The ultimate question in the Oval Office is the red line. What action by Kim Jong Un compels the president to authorize a full, kinetic military response, risking the terrifying possibility of nuclear war? This decision, the most difficult of the emergency plan, is a moral and strategic tightrope walk. The red line is a complex, multi-layered threshold, not a single point. It moves based on intelligence and the strategic environment. However, there are three non-negotiable breaches that immediately trigger the highest level of military response. Firstly, attack on US personnel, territory. Any kinetic attack on a US military base, embassy, or territory, including Guam, Alaska, or Hawaii, is an act of war, triggering an immediate and overwhelming retaliatory strike. Secondly, use of nuclear, chemical weapons. This is the highest breach of international norms and would immediately unify the world in condemnation and military response. The action would be designed to neutralize the entire nuclear proliferation capability. Thirdly, large-scale attack on Seoul, Tokyo. A massive, unprovoked conventional or chemical attack on the capitals of South Korea or Japan, resulting in mass casualties, would require immediate military interdiction to protect the lives and security of US allies. The moment the red line is crossed, the geopolitical analysis is over. The focus shifts entirely to decisive action, prioritizing the protection of allied forces and the freedom of the region. The most effective tool in the emergency plan is not the kinetic option, but the credible threat of it. Deterrence is about psychological projection, convincing Kim Jong Un that the cost of his North Korean next move is existential. Firstly, public readiness. Making the military readiness publicly visible reinforces the commitment. The show of force is amplified by the image of US troops and THAAD batteries being placed on high alert. Secondly, private channels, simultaneously using back channels to communicate directly and unequivocally to Kim Jong Un that the response will be overwhelming, swift, and designed for total neutralization. This strategic dance appeals to the desire for peace by emphasizing the fear of the consequences. Even at the brink of war, the moral imperative remains to achieve security with the least loss of life. This is the difficult lesson of history, that restraint is the true mark of leadership. The emergency plan is designed to provide maximum options before a kinetic strike is necessary, focusing on economic and cyber paralysis to compel Kim Jong Un to back down. The courage and endurance shown by those in the line of fire, and the restraint shown by the leadership in the Oval Office, sends a final, powerful message. The world chooses peace and freedom over the destructive path of Kim Jong Un. The 48 hours of the immediate crisis window closes, but the North Korea threat remains a long-term challenge. The final stage of the emergency plan is to transition from immediate crisis management to sustainable deterrence and peace building. Regardless of whether the crisis was diffused by diplomatic means or resolved by a limited kinetic response, the US defense strategy must immediately pivot back to diplomacy. Firstly, the power of norms. Using the unified global response to establish new, stronger international norms against missile proliferation and cyber warfare. Secondly, sustainable sanctions. Ensuring that the newly implemented sanctions remain in place and are vigorously enforced until Kim Jong Un verifiably commits to denuclearization. This hits the regime's lifeline, the pain of economic isolation. The crisis underscores the future of security. It's defined by precision and real-time intelligence. Firstly, layered missile defense. Investing further in new generations of THAAD and Aegis BMD systems to ensure a foolproof defense against any future North Korean next move. Secondly, cyber resilience. Building a global cybersecurity framework to resist the next wave of cyber warfare attacks. protecting the financial and health infrastructure of Allah. This strategic investment in technology fulfills the desire for long-term security and freedom. The cooperation shown by global allies during the 48 hours of crisis, from the UN condemnation to the military synchronization, is the ultimate lesson. Unity is the strongest deterrent against chaos. The courage and endurance shown by those in the line of fire, and the restraint shown by the leadership in the Oval Office, sends a final, powerful message. The world chooses peace and freedom over the destructive path of Kim Jong Un. The fields that burned today will grow again, and the people who stood in the line of fire will one day tell their children not about destruction, but about courage, unity, and the unbroken wish for peace. If you found this deep dive into the emergency plan valuable, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss our next mission. This is War Power Vision, where every strategic decision has a story.